Hi folks, this is video 2 concerning the actual subject, developmental psychology. So we're looking at, what it is. What is this course in terms of its span of knowledge, in terms of what we will study and so on. So we left off and there was one more basic question among big questions that developmental psychologists ask, and that is, how does social context affect the development of individuals? We know that the effect is huge. What are the various subcategories of that? What effects are there? And how does that work? How does that shape development? So I think you can see that although these are questions we would like to answer fully, that they're very basic and very broad and very deep. And so we're going to do our best, but as I said before I started this little list of questions, we're going to fail because these are the biggest, best questions we have that we're shooting for, but we're still working on them. Learning more, but working on them. Okay. So I want to talk to you about some sequences that you might not be fully aware of. Sequences that are not in the text, sequences that have to do with changes across the lifespan in a different way than we're going to look at when we go to the stage-by-stage method of looking. Okay? We're going to look at a broader system of sequences. The first one is that we are born into 100% dependence. In fact, humans are dependent longer than essentially any other animal on the face of the earth. Chimpanzees outpace infants immediately, and but humans are, as part of our process of development, 100% dependent for a very long time, and we have a long gestation period as well. You might think that the ultimate goal is to become 100% independent. What we mean by that in developmental psychology is that you are able to navigate the world as an individual person. You could survive and flourish. Okay, that isn't something that a 12-year-old can do, or maybe even a 15-year-old. But as we get into the older numbers, 18, 20, 25, then the chances of us being more independent in terms of survival increases. Now, at a social level in the United States, we might think that independence is a final goal. That is to say, what I want to be is on my own, and I'm not going to have to depend on anybody, and I'm going to pay my own bills and call my own shots and make my own decisions, and that's the end of it. Well, that's not the end of it. That may be not a necessarily good way to think of things, and most other countries in the world are not focused on their independence as individuals, but rather are focused on a collective system of extended family that you live with your entire life, for example. Well, so what's the next stage? And the next stage would be interdependence, that we move closer as we age to needing each other, recognizing that, using each other's skills and resources, supporting each other. This is certainly true at every level. It's true within marriages and partnerships. It's true within families. We can see this. In fact, giving up the notion that full independence is the measure of maturity, generally it doesn't happen right away. It hits you in the 30s and 40s, maybe, certainly in the 50s, I think it does, in the form of feeling more generative towards younger generations. The next kind of sequence I want to talk about is that when we're born, we are regulated by other people. Our lives and just about everything from eating and bathing, regulated by other regulation. And then we have what's called co-regulation in the single-digit years from, say, about starting around 2, 3, 4, and up to almost the teenage years, where ideally a person gets more and more chance to make their own decisions with the help and sort of the boundaries set by the parents, right, or the caretaker, usually the parents. And then as we get older, we have self-regulation. Okay, and through the teenage years, that has to really ramp up. So actually, ideal parenting is about uh, letting go and helping children to solve problems and make good decisions, and not helicoptering them and snowplowing their way through life, so that they learn how to deal with difficult situations and make decisions. And in that process, we let them go more and more, because they have to be on their own at some point, or mostly on their own, right? Okay. Um, and then another part of this is not just co-regulation. That's not the last step. The last part of this is self-regulation again, which is where you get to be doing the things you need to do for yourself that keep you healthy and happy and productive. Okay, that's really what self-regulation is. Okay, so another sequence is an outward orientation, which is what you have when you're first born. You're not looking within yourself. You're focused on the world around you with your senses. You're focused on what's going on around you. And then, as time moves along, particularly sometime after puberty, you begin to take a more and more inward view. You start thinking about, are you okay? How do you measure up? You even start that as a 4 or 5-year-old, but that it really takes an apex. It really gets significant in the teenage years. More for girls than boys on average, but men lag behind in that a bit. But lagging's the wrong word. It has a negative connotation, doesn't it? They come to that a little bit later. How about that? But there's an inward view. You see this when people have diaries and so forth. In the teenage years, where they talk to best friends about the innermost stuff. They really, how they feel about themselves, their emotions, their thoughts. They really look inward. And then, at some point, over time, not a moment, but a process, we take a somewhat more worldly view, a transcendent orientation, where we are members of a collective world population. We are stitches in a fabric, if you will, a social fabric that is international, believe it or not. Here's another set of sequences. So one is we start out as a fully feeling animal. I use that word in a good way. We are 100% feeling. I don't know if you've ever raised babies, but 100% feeling. Then thinking comes online, because we know that our brain is developing in massive ways, and neural networks are coming online, and neural networks are forming, and so on. And so thinking becomes big. This is obvious in the school age years. Yeah, obvious with the things that they can do at 8 that they couldn't do at 5, for example. Okay. And then when we move into the teenage years, there's both thinking and feeling, and ultimately, really beyond that, although I don't talk about it in your PowerPoint at all, you might wish to know that that thinking and feeling combination becomes very useful in the most highest developed individuals. In other words, people who are really functioning on all cylinders. They use feelings to inform their thinking, and they use their thinking to inform their feeling. Okay, this is sometimes called emotional IQ, EQ. Okay, emotional intelligence is what I was trying to come up with. Okay, then the next sequence is self-absorption. So we are all about ourselves and the world to start with. We're completely egocentric, but quickly demonstrate empathy. Even in a few months, in 6 months, we can determine in recent experiments the level of empathy, that is the understanding of the plight or condition of another person, another child, and can determine what's fair and what's not in treatment. Yeah, but you begin to move towards other absorption. As you get into the mid to late teens, you become absorbed with another person as opposed to just yourself. This is what the core really of sexual interest is. that erupts and we use different words for this: puppy love and crushes. That's sexual interest. It's not seen by the individual as that, but that's really what it is. Okay, so we have an other absorption. And then as time moves on still further, we may have what's called a world absorption, where we become interested in and fascinated with, and not so much driven by things like hormones, and we've been through the self-absorption phases and the parts of that are necessary, and then we've been through all of those things, and we become interested in where we are in the world and the absorption we may have with faraway places and people that are not like us, and become part of this fabric that I talked about. And then the next one is really interesting. We start out as thinking that love, no one if you ask a baby, they can't tell you, but dependent love is what we experience from the beginning. So our experience of what love is from the get-go is that we can depend on another person to provide us what we need. Okay, to make us feel good and to keep us healthy and that kind of thing. Okay, we don't put it in those thinking words and thinking in those words, no, but that's what it is. That's what love is. It's how we would define it. Why do you love your mother? Because she kisses me at night and tucks me in, or she reads me a book, or she fixes my favorite food. She gives me ravioli when I want ravioli. That's how kids talk about it. And then when the hormones hit, then love is defined in two ways. One is the sexual part, which we talked about for a minute, and then combined with our really primordial sense of what love is, and that's dependency. So you see in the teenage years, up to about 17, 18, and at least, if not longer, you see kiddos defining the person they're interested in, that they really feel like they love. Here's air quotes. I hate air quotes. I just did one. I did another one. Okay, air quotes. That love is, I can depend on this person, and I'm also sexually attracted to them. And you see this in the way they describe that person. They're there when I need them. They answer my text immediately, and they get all out of shape if the texts aren't answered right away. You know that. So there's an example of what I mean. And then ultimately, though, mature love becomes more evident, and that takes experience. What we want are people to date different folks to see who they fit with, and we want people to learn how to trust and not trust. I teach a course called The Psychology of Human Relationships. We spend a lot of time on this issue. You don't really understand what mature love is until you're 30 or 35, somewhere in there. I know. I said when I was 20, I was madly in love, and I thought I really was. I had no idea that I wasn't. Everybody says that. Okay. All right. So hang on. We're going to cover it in the next video coming up.